Hi guys, my name's Karen, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys by a novel by James Baldwin called Another Country. Another Country by James Baldwin expresses so many things, such as homosexuality, drugs and alcohol abuse, and how all these things that go on in your life and that you deal with on a daily basis help you as a character grow throughout your life.
Okay, so the topic that I'm going to be talking about is drugs and alcohol. And since the main topic we wanted to discuss in our project is the growth of the characters, I wanted to discuss how drugs and alcohol correlates with that, with character growth, because we believe that all these topics somehow connect with one another, which is sort of what this novel was really trying to do. To be honest, it presents a lot of topics, big and small, that go with one another. So it provides a good landscape for debate and discussion, which is what keeps people talking about a novel, which is what helps create that novel's legacy. So drugs and alcohol, for me, in my opinion, presents sort of the darkness, because everything that grows sort of starts out from something dark, and it blossoms into something bright and happy. Um, you know, it depending on the situation, some people or whatever is growing takes longer. Some object, whatever, takes a smaller amount of time to grow. It just depends on the circumstances, and I believe that in the novel the circumstances were obviously not that great. It took place in a time where discrimination was very apparent, and it definitely created self-hatred in not only society but in just individual people. Like, people that were being discriminated against were making themselves believe, or not making themselves believe, people were making them believe that they're worthless, and that's what causes people to turn to stuff like drugs and alcohol, to sort of forget about that worthlessness they feel from themselves and from society. And people do that, thinking that it'll help them and make them happy and cheerful, but in reality it just makes things worse, which is the irony, which is present a lot in this book, actually. Rufus, he did a lot of drugs and alcohol. He met Leona, and it was from the very beginning, it was always just, he was always on drugs and alcohol. And he met Leona, and and things were going good, and it just turned reckless very fast. He would beat her, he would say things to her, and it just ruined everything. And that's what happens, and that happened to his relationship with other characters in the book as well, such as his best friend Vivaldo. And you know in order to grow, you have to overcome obstacles, and drugs and alcohol definitely is that obstacle that he needed to overcome to truly grow, and he unfortunately didn't really get to do that. He ended up committing suicide, and that's kind of what happens if you're afraid to grow, or if you're unable to grow, you're just gonna die. And that's sort of kind of what drugs and alcohol did to him. And it wasn't just drugs and alcohol, obviously. It was the discrimination that was going on at the time. It was his past experiences. A lot of factors play into that, which brings me back to the original point that all these topics correlate with one another in several ways, in several points of the book, I guess. And so yeah, so for me, drugs and alcohol presents an obstacle that people need to overcome in order to grow. Because if you're not able to overcome these obstacles, you just won't grow, and you're just gonna wither down until you just die. And that's pretty much life. Oh my god, I dropped my phone, but that's pretty much life. It's just you need to overcome the darkness, and that's sort of where character growth begins.
Baldwin uses affairs throughout his novel to demonstrate the types of challenges and hardships each character is undergoing. By doing so, he gives the reader an inside look on each of the characters' hardships. as well as demonstrates how the characters will overcome these hardships. Baldwin touches on straight affairs as well as homosexual and interracial ones, which gives every reader equal representation. Another Country deals with many affairs. Another Country deals with many affairs which help character development, and also helps the reader get an inside look onto why they began the affair in the first place. Cass began to have an affair with a man named Eric. Cass wanted the attention which her husband Richard was not giving her. But Eric was filling the empty hole inside of her heart that needed to be filled. Although she knew that it was wrong, and she knew of the consequences, she didn't care. She began to love Eric, but Eric, on the other hand, didn't love her. Cass and Richard's relationship proves that just because you're married does not mean you're happy, or that you will stay happy. Interracial relationships are a major role in the book, from Richard and Leona to Vivaldo and Ida. Baldwin uses racism and sexism as an excuse for Ida's affair with Ellis. Baldwin uses racism and sexism throughout the novel. Baldwin uses racism and sexism as the main reason for Ida's affair against Vivaldo with Alice. Ida always broke Vivaldo's heart. Ida always broke Vivaldo's heart by making him feel like less of a man, all because he's white. Cass comes clean to Richard about her affair with Eric. Ida comes clean to Vivaldo about her affair with Alice. And Eric comes clean to Cass that he does not love her. He loves Ives.
We see as we began to read this book, we talked about so many topics in class. I think one of the topics that we talked about the most was love. And in this book, I believe that there's so many types of love. There's love as romance love, like romantic love. There's love, there's self-love, love towards yourself, and so many other things. I think that self-love was one of the most important things for this book. In the beginning of the book, we see Rufus, who's a black man who is living in the streets currently. We see his sister, Ida, who's a black woman. And we see how Rufus, as a black man, cannot get to himself to believe that a white woman will be in love with him. And we see how Ida is a total opposite of him, thinking that a white man is okay for her to be loved by. As we see these differences between each character, we see how they grew as a character as well. We see how Rufus falls in love with Leona, who is a white woman. We see how they had a relationship and how throughout the novel we see how their relationship started going from uphill right back downhill. We see how him being in love with her and then him thinking to himself, she can't love me because of the color of my skin. And I think that he grew so much as a character, not just him as a main character being Rufus, but so did Ida, Leona, Vivaldo, and Eric. They all grew so much as characters throughout the novel that there's so many things that I can't even express on how they grew. We see how Vivaldo, being a white male, being Rufus's best friend, how he has such a big heart for Rufus, and how when Rufus was on the streets, we see how Vivaldo was right there, always trying to find him, trying to see where he was, trying to see if he was okay. We see so many things happening throughout the book. And within all of these things, there were troubles, such as drugs and alcohol abuse. And that's all I got.
So, in conclusion, this novel, Another Country by James Baldwin. Why did I just look at the cover of the book as if I didn't know who wrote it? But the novel presents a lot of interesting topics that definitely present a lot of thinking, or not present a lot of thinking, that sort of allows people to think more and to talk about things that people at this time that the book was written wouldn't talk about. And the topics that me and my contributing group members decided on definitely have to do with one another in one way, which is what makes this project so easy in a way, because if all the topics that we chose go together, it will definitely be easier to talk about, and it will sort of be easier to sort of pick the book apart and discuss as to why it is very important and significant, and why the book's legacy is still around to this day. So the three topics that we discussed in this video were affairs, drug and alcohol abuse, and the growth of the characters. And we definitely believe that all three of those topics go with one another. Um, Affairs definitely has a lot to do with trust, which is actually not one of our topics, but it's an example as to how certain topics go with one another. Drugs and alcohol abuse can go into affairs as well. Like, on top of trust issues, drugs and alcohol just makes things worse. It ruins a lot of relationships. And that also affects growth of characters. If you don't trust people, or if you're cheating on the people that you love the most, that's going to affect your growth as a person, or as a character in this case. So, yeah, we just basically decided to highlight how all these topics go with one another, their significance, and why they are important to the book's legacy. And we definitely did enjoy reading this novel, and we really hope that next year's class reads the novel with like such an open form of thinking that allows them to sort of pay more attention to certain things in literature, as opposed to just taking it, as to what they see, because that definitely affects people's ability to read the book and understand it. And yeah, that's pretty much what we have to say. And we definitely enjoyed working together. It was a lot of fun, and we can't wait to see what we read next.